All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to this session of our spring 2021 Days of Learning called Bread and Torah. I am Rabbi Eli Freedman. I use the pronouns he and him. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for our discussion. Um, and I'll invite you all to, if you can, to make sure your names are correct there, and please, if you're able to also put your pronouns there, that would be wonderful. Um, we are. I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelists that we have. And I'll invite them all to introduce themselves. We're going to be hearing from some really wonderful folks in a moment. But first, I just a couple words to kind of get us started. First of all, just a reminder that here at Rodef Shalom, we care equally about Jewish learning and creating profound connections. And it's just wonderful to be together. And I look forward to some wonderful discussion in this group with everyone. And I also appreciate the diversity of both our participants and our panelists and the diversity of ideas that we'll bring to this discussion. So without further ado, we're going to begin with our prayer for the study of Torah, and then I will introduce our panelists and our tech and say a little more about what we're going to be doing. So thank you so much, Vivi, for putting that up. And I'll invite you while on mute, just so we don't get too much feedback, to join with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who helps with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. Wonderful. All right. So as I said, in a moment, I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to allow each of them to speak for a few minutes to talk about their work and what they do. Then we chose a few questions ahead of time that I'm going to present to all the panelists to allow them to kind of answer, to delve a little deeper into our topic. And then we really want to open it up for all of you, all the participants here, to ask your questions. I'll invite you to sort of wait until after our panelists have all presented, but feel free, if before then you have questions, you can put them in the chat. That's sort of a great way while we're going, and we'll get to them. We'll definitely address them towards the end. And then we'll also have more of an open period at the end where people can also use the hand raise button or other things if they'd like to ask questions. So I want to begin just with a word of Torah, just to kind of get us started, to kind of frame some of this discussion. And so the session is called Bread and Torah. We actually got this from a quote from Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is one of the books in our rabbinic literature. It's one of the first books in the Mishnah from the rabbis. It literally means the ethics of our ancestors. And there's a quote from Pirkei Avot, chapter 3, verse 17, where Rabbi Ben Elazar ben Azariah says, "Where there is no bread, there is no Torah. And where there is no Torah, there is no bread." Very succinct, beautiful words from Ben Azariah. And in Hebrew, imein kemach ein Torah, imein Torah ein kemach. What is Ben Azariah saying here? I think to better understand his words, I want to tell you one other story. And it's actually a story that's very relevant to the time period we're in right now. We are in a time period called the Omer. The Omer is the period of, and it's a harvest period, actually. Omer means a sheaf of grain, so it's very fitting. Passover in Israel marks the barley harvest. Shavuot coming up is the wheat harvest. And the Omer is that period between Passover and Shavuot, representing that harvest, but it's also the period from the redemption from Egypt to the revelation at Sinai from these holidays. And it's a time of spiritual growth. We traditionally count each day. Friday will mark the 33rd day of the Omer, known in our Hebrew calendar as Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, Lamed Gimel in Hebrew, is equal to 33, and it's the 33rd day of the Omer. This is a special day for a multitude of reasons. Traditionally, this was the day that a plague that was befalling Rabbi Akiva's students ended. But Lag BaOmer is also very intimately connected with the famous sage Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai. Shimon Bar Yochai supposedly was born and died on Lag BaOmer. And Shimon Bar Yochai, if you go to Israel on Lag BaOmer, they have the kids play with bow and arrows and they have bonfires. This is all connected with Shimon Bar Yochai's sort of mythology. One of the most famous stories of Shimon Bar Yochai is in the Talmud, and it's from Shabbat 33b. The story goes that a group of rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, were sitting and they were talking about the Romans. Anyone seen that great part in the movie Life of Brian, Monty Python, Life of Brian? I think it's John Cleese says something like, "What have the Romans ever done for us?" Oh, well, they made aqueducts. Oh, yeah, but besides the aqueducts, what have the Romans ever done for us? Well, they made the roads. Besides the roads, what have the Romans ever done for us? It's a great line. I think they got this from the Talmud because that's actually the discussion that they're having. And a couple of the rabbis praise the Romans, but Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says all that the Romans set up, they didn't set it up except for their own needs. They set up markets so they could put prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, bridges to take taxes from them. And the news of Shimon Bar Yochai's comments reaches the Roman authorities and they sentence him to death. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai then flees for his life along with his son, where he hides in a cave. And this is the moment, according to tradition, when the Zohar actually was written, during this mystical experience in this cave. He has this experience where he hides out in this cave for 12 years until the current Caesar dies, and he finally goes out into the world. Now, this is the key. You'll see where I'm going here. He's been in this mystical experience. He's been studying Torah. He's been secluded in this cave as sort of like a monk for all these years. He goes out into the world, and what does he do? The first thing they do is they see people plowing and planting. And Rabbi Shimeon says they are leaving over eternal life and involving themselves with temporary life. And every place upon which they would set their eyes would immediately burn. They had like Superman laser vision. God then says, "Did you come out of this cave to destroy my world? Go back to your cave." And God sends them back to the cave to further analyze. Ultimately, what this story is teaching us is that our Jewish tradition says we can't just live in this place of deep philosophical learning all day long. We can't just be in this place of Torah. We need bread. We need sustenance in this world. And Shimon Bar Yochai's issue was we can't just be working in this world and focused on just the material needs. We also need Torah. And ultimately, they come to this balance. And that is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's famous line in the title of this session: without Torah, there is no bread. Without bread, there is no Torah. That we need to act. We need to live in this world. We need to do the very real things, but we also have higher ideals behind that. We bring Torah to that work. And so all that to say, I'm so excited now for us to hear from these panelists who are really going to speak about how they do the very physical work of bringing food to people, but also that they have those deeper values of Judaism and Torah behind them, and that we need both in this world. So I'm thrilled to introduce. I'll first just introduce our tech, Vivian, who's here with us. Thank you so much. I don't know if you want to just say hi quickly.
Hi, everyone. If you have questions, just come to me, private message me. Hopefully everything will go swimmingly. That's what I'm prepared for. So thank you for letting me join you today. And I'm glad that I get to see all your stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. So in our description of the class, we said, meet a farmer who partners with adults with developmental disabilities. Well, this is the wonderful Jane McDowell, a newer member of our congregation, and we're looking forward to hearing her story. We have a South Philly grocery store owner. This is our very own Allie Hauptman, who many of you might know from her father, Michael Hauptman, our immediate past president. But I'll say, no offense to you, Mike, Allie is an amazing congregant in her own right and really just an incredible asset to our community. And lastly, a volunteer leader in feeding our food insecure neighbors, and that is the wonderful Dan Seltzer, longstanding member of our board, who is one of the leaders of our Breaking Bread on Broad initiative. And so I'm going to have each of them just spend a couple minutes first just introducing themselves, talking about the work they do, and then I'll pose some questions to all three of our panelists to talk about and discuss, and then we hope to hear some questions from you. The session today goes until 3:30. We'll make sure to leave time at the end for your questions, and the room will be open afterwards for all of you just to hang out a little bit and discuss if you want for 15 minutes afterwards. So why don't we, Allie, would you like to begin and kick us off? You're the first one I see sort of on my screen.
Okay, sure. So my name is Allie Hauptman. I run a corner grocery in South Philly. I'm one of three owners. The other owner is my husband, Travis, who handles the grocery ordering, all the produce sourcing, everything like that. And then our other partner, Jen, and I run a kitchen that's on site. And what the kitchen is able to do is help prevent food waste. We're able to cycle through the produce quickly and make sure that we're using things without having to toss anything in the trash. And we're also able to, we make prepared foods, we do some catering, we do sell sandwiches and things to other cafes in the neighborhood. So having these various streams of income help us keep markups lower in the store. We're not only relying on the produce and things, and this enables us to be able to really serve everybody in our community. And we definitely, our neighborhood is really changing a lot. We're like kind of a little southeast of Point Breeze, I guess you'd say. And so our goal is really to be serving like the longest term residents of the neighborhood and making everybody feel welcome there. And we also are able to work with other mutual aid groups in Philly and provide spaces for a pretty wide variety of other organizations to sell their products or do a little job training on our site and things like that that I might get into a little later. But I think that pretty much sums it up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Allie. I'll turn it. I have, at least on my screen, I have Dan next. So Dan Seltzer, tell us a little about your work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Seltzer. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for coming to our discussion. I am a co-leader in the Breaking Bread on Broad program with Ellen Poster, who is also in on this and is one of the leaders for putting on this week of Days of Learning, along with Gail Malcolm-Meister. So good to see the two of you. Breaking Bread on Broad started probably 3 years ago. And the purpose of it was to provide lunches and breakfast and some educational or recreational content to neighborhood children. And the reason is that when in the Philadelphia School District, every child in every grade is entitled to a free breakfast and a free lunch because of the general poverty level in Philadelphia. So you don't have to prove anything, you don't have to show anything, you don't have to submit financial statements, you're entitled to breakfasts and lunches. And about 3 years ago during the summer when the children aren't in school, the Road of Shalom became one of many outlets across Philadelphia that provided these pre-made breakfasts and lunches to those children so that they could continue to have those breakfasts and lunches, lunches. And in March 2020, the pandemic hit and the school system shut down. And the largest sponsor of this food program, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, was able to pivot their activity and given all of the restrictions, we became a food pantry where the boxes were delivered to us once a week. Each box contained 5 breakfasts, 5 lunches, and every family was entitled to have 1 box per child. Now, we have been able to supplement that food with other food sources, which I can discuss later on in this session today. But there was one other thing I wanted to say, which is that 18 months ago when we started this, we had about 15 to 20 families who would come once a week to pick up their boxes of food. We now serve about, on average, 70 families. We've had as many as 100 families consistently coming through for each week, and it goes up and it goes down. And our volunteer staff, which is not only RS congregants, but some other people that I hope I get a chance to talk about who are not RS congregants, have become critical members of our volunteer force. We probably have a core of 12 to 15 congregants and a larger group of about 20 to 25 who volunteer in one capacity or another for this once a week food pantry operation. And I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. And Jane, if you'll tell us a little about your work. Oh, Jane, your volume isn't coming. I'm not hearing your sound. You're unmuted, but the sound wasn't coming through. I don't think, no one else hears her, right? No.
Jane, you might be connected to a speaker, maybe, and nope.
Maybe sign out and sign back in again. That
Yeah.
works.
I think
sometimes.
that's usually, yeah. All right,
If not, maybe she can switch to her phone and see if it
Mhm.
works on that.
Great idea, Vivi. Yeah. All right, we'll give her a second. Looks like she's back in. No, I still don't. Nope, I still don't hear you.
Jane, is there any way for you to switch to your phone?
Use the phone audio.
She doesn't know how to call in. I don't think you need to do Zoom. You just need to, there's a way to get a phone number to call in, but I don't remember how to do it.
Yeah.
I can look into the Zoom link for the phone.
All right, I'm going to let Vivian, maybe you can work with Jane sort of offline. While we do that, just to keep things moving a little bit, I do want to hear, we really want to hear from you, Jane, but maybe just to make the most of our time, I'll begin. We have a couple questions that we sort of selected ahead of time that I want to, so I'm going to maybe start with some of those questions for Dan and Allie, and then hopefully we'll catch up and we'll get Jane in soon. So I'll start with, and Dan or Allie, either one of you can begin with this. How did your life experiences bring you to the work you currently do? What inspired you to take on this work?
I can start if you want. So I guess I've been working in restaurants for, I mean, probably at this point, like 15 years or so. And at the time when we kind of came up with the idea for the grocery store, our partner Jen and I were running a school lunch program at Friends School Haverford, and cooking for the kids every day. And the program that we were running was coming to an end, and we were trying to figure out ways that we could still work together, and also having both worked in all kinds of restaurant environments, like how can we use the skills that we learned there to like provide for our community, and not only just could work in a restaurant environment, like actually do things that can like help people at like more of a community level. And at the same time, my husband Travis was leaving his job, having worked in retail produce for a really long time. And he was kind of throwing around the idea of like maybe he could open a corner market. And one of like we have so many corner stores in our neighborhood and they're all really terrific. But the one thing is it's really hard to carry fresh produce because if it goes bad, you have to toss it. And that's a lot of loss, like financially. And also it's like wasteful in the environment. And so Jen and I were saying, well, if you have a kitchen in your store, perhaps that can help cut down on the food waste. And that'll be a bonus, like financially, and also in terms of sustainability, that'll be like a really big plus. And yeah, it all just kind of came together from there. And all of us just kind of leaving our different but similar careers like at the same time really kind of brought us together as like a pretty solid group. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much where it came from. So
I love that. You know, Allie, you make it sound very, as we say in Hebrew, like, or Yiddish, beshert, you know, meant to be, that it's sort of, you know, all the pieces lined up. That was really amazing. But also, I really want to lift up that there was that strong desire to make a difference in your neighborhood and to really do something about that. So that's beautiful.
yeah, thank you.
Dan, can you tell us a little bit about how your life experiences brought you to this work and what inspired you to take on this leadership role?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to start out to say I've long recognized how fortunate I am for a lot of reasons. And I began getting involved in you know, giving back to the community probably 15 years ago. And through Road of Shalom, I had participated through my employer with Habitat for Humanity, and I organized several Habitat Humanity efforts with RS. I became more involved in social action at RS. I just liked the resonance of community giving back and Judaism. It just resonated with me, made me proud to be and feel Jewish. But I also got involved in organizing and operating a farmers market at RS for 3 summers. And then that's when the Breaking Bread on Broad program started after that. But so, sorry for all this preamble, probably in February or so of 2020, I'd been retired for 6 months. And I had heard that RS was getting ready for the summer program of Breaking Bread on Broad, and they were looking for congregants who could do things with the children. So I'd been tormenting my wife with my guitar playing for years, and I thought, well, why just limit it to her? Why don't I be the musical entertainment at Breaking Bread on Broad for the children? And I said I would do that, and they said, fine. Well, the program shifted to this weekly food pantry operation, and I brought my guitar over, and for about 3 weeks in the spring, I was just playing songs, and I don't know, it seemed okay, but I could see that there was obviously a lot of work to be done. So I stopped bringing my guitar and started pitching in. And lo and behold, there's an enormous amount of physical activity that needs to be done to make this operation happen. And I just enjoyed the operations challenge. Again, here I was doing Jewish and helping give back to the community. And I think Ellen Poster also, I never said this to her, but she was and is a great inspiration because she's so passionate about the food pantry and all things social action. So I think that's how I got to where I am, where I guess I would say I share some of the leadership responsibilities with Ellen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan. It looks like we got Jane back. And no, sorry. We still can't hear you. I liked maybe Malka's idea of maybe try calling Malka on your cell phone. She put her number in the chat if you can see it. And maybe we can just, or you can try calling me and we can just like hold you up to the speaker or something. All right, why don't we work on that? I'll let folks work on that and we'll just kind of continue our discussion a little bit. Allie and Dan, both of you kind of touched on obviously some of the Jewish connection. Allie, I heard a lot about, and I like some of the questions Malka already raised about food waste. And of course, there's a Jewish value that some of us know about called, oh, are we working? All right. You know what? I'll pause on that question because we may be ready to hear Jane. Let's see.
Okay, hi everyone. So oh man, I was trying to figure out how to connect to Bluetooth speakers, and now I have Bluetooth speakers, but I'm talking through my cell phone. So I have techception happening right now.
Well, we hear you. So Jane, tell us a little about Camp Hill. Tell us how you ended up there. Tell us about the work you do there and what kind of brought you to that work.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a small town in Southern Oregon, little mountain town. And really the culture of that town was very much so, oh goodness. Okay, can people still hear me? I just turned my speaker off on my computer and I just want to make sure because I'm getting backlash. Okay, sorry. Okay, so it was very much a part of the culture of my hometown to really like cultivate a deep relationship with the earth because it's the small hippie mountain town in Southern Oregon tucked away in the hillsides. So I grew up very much deeply connected to the natural world, hiking, backpacking, horseback riding, just all over the place. Anything I could do outdoors, I was doing it. And so when the time came that I was ready to kind of like move on from my hometown, I made an account on the Woofing Project, which is this amazing nonprofit organization, online organization that, you pay a small fee for an account, and then it connects you to all these different organic farms all over the United States and also some farms in other countries. And you essentially apply to be a volunteer, and in exchange, you get room and board. So it's a really cheap way to travel, and it's an awesome way to learn about organic farming. If that's like something that you're interested in. So I made my account, and very quickly after that, the volunteer director of Camp Hill, or the Camp Hill that I'm living in PA, reached out to me, and kind of one thing led to another, and the rest is history. So I'm living in a community called Camp Hill. The primary focus is that it's a social therapeutic community. So we co-live and co-work with people with developmental disabilities. Most of our people are elderly, so it's a lot of personal care and elder care, as well as, just living and doing other things. And really the goal of the community is to kind of cultivate and create a lifestyle for them where they can have an integritous life and where they can then learn new skills and learn to build those skills, and feel like they have a sense of individuality and independence, because very often in the outside world, people with developmental disabilities are kind of walked through life with someone holding their hand. So really the community, like, that's its primary focus. The community is on 432 acres of land. So we have our own CSA, we have our own bakery, we have an herb garden, and we have a dairy farm. So I work primarily either in the house, cooking and cleaning for a house of 8, or I'm on the dairy working with cattle in a biodynamic raw milk dairy farm. We have 75 cattle. We're milking 35 of those. Obviously, that number fluctuates depending on, who's pregnant and who's not, and who needs to be dried off. Our herd is like made up of different breeds of cattle. Like we have New Zealand Friesians, we have brown Swiss, and we have Jersey cows. And we produce like 4,500 pounds of raw milk per week.
Wow.
And that is getting, and we distribute it. So it gets distributed amongst our community, other Camp Hill communities. We also sell at Whole Foods, Kimberton Whole Foods. Yes, Kimberton Whole Foods, Mom's Organic Market, Forge Hill Farm, November Farms, Red Dog Farm. And because it's raw milk, we take huge amounts of precaution with how we prepare or how we keep things safe and sanitary, because we are an organic farm, but we're also biodynamic, and it's also raw milk. So we use a lot of like heavy duty sanitization to clean the machinery and prepare the cattle to get milked. Yeah.
That's
Is that enough?
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful start. Thank you. I love that. Thank you for sharing all that. I think, Malka, I might mute you just while I'm talking, because I think there was a little feedback, but thank you for being our extra text. So helpful. So saying before, obviously this is a session at a congregation. And so we're talking about sort of the Jewish connection to a lot of this. And Allie, in some of your work, I definitely heard ideas of Bal Tashchit, our Jewish commandment not to waste. And I'm interested actually to hear really from all three of you how your Jewish values play out in the work you do, how they led you to this, and what Jewish values you sort of lift up in that work that you're doing.
To speak on like food waste, this is like a huge part of how we run our business. I noticed there was a question in the chat to talk a little bit more about that as well. So first of all, I guess like the kitchen really supports the store in making sure that there is not food waste from the store. So for example, if we get something in that doesn't sell as fast as we hoped it would, and we want to still use it before it like actually spoils. For example, Travis ordered some mangoes recently that for some reason people were not interested in. And so before they spoiled, I was able to take them to the kitchen, make a puree with them, store that in the freezer. So then the next time I was baking, I put it in a cake. And so now we're serving the cake. We'd like to keep fresh herbs in the store, but they don't have like a very long shelf life. So Travis will just order them when he sees they're starting to get wilty. And if your herbs are wilty, they're still fine. They're not so perky for the shelf, but it's no problem for us to use them in cooking or to make a sauce. Or if he's running low on something and wants to get more, we'll take the end of whatever was on the shelf. So everything is fresh, everything's from the same day. And so we'll make soups, vegetable soups, sandwiches, we'll make salads. And it's just a really great way to just cycle through things fast enough that everything's always fresh. And then while we're cooking, it's great to be mindful of, I was slicing tomatoes for sandwiches, and when you get to the end, you can't put that slice on with the little, the stem. But while I was making those sandwiches, Jen was chopping up stuff for vegetable soup and said, give me your tomato ends, because you can cut around the stem and use those parts of the tomato while you can't put them onto the sandwich. So we work together to say, oh, what are you chopping up? I'll take the end of it and use it in a different way. or use the ends to make a stock and things like that. So that's definitely like, and we also compost through Bennett Compost. So any bits that you can't use end up in the compost. So that's like a really great way to keep everything in the store fresh. And we're constantly making different things up in the kitchen. And yeah, that's how our food waste works. And I guess other Jewish values, I think that we bring to the business, I think are just, about, giving back to your community. We all felt like we had skills and resources that we could share. If we have something, we can give it as well. And just making sure we're supporting our community as best as we can. So.
I love that, Allie. I think about, not that long ago in the Torah, when we learn about the building of the Mishkan, the dwelling place, their sort of portable sanctuary, Moses asks all the Israelites to bring their gifts. And every Israelite has their own gifts, which they're bringing to create this community. And just the fact that, to use those God-given abilities to help create this community. And of course, in Pirkei Avot, one of the texts we looked at the beginning, there's a famous line from Rabbi Hillel who says, Al tifros min hatzibor, very simply, do not separate yourself from the community. We are meant to live among each other and to be there and to support each other. So what you're doing it's just amazing. Thank you. Dan or Jane, do you want to speak? Yeah, Dan, do you want to speak
sure.
a little to the Jewish values that lead you in your work?
Well, certainly providing, help to the neighbor, and there's a commandment in the Torah, Rabbi, you can provide chapter and verse about leaving the corners of your fields for the poor, and that's
it's actually quite a few times in the Torah, including just this past week in Leviticus 19, the holiness code.
Right. So I'm a regular student, but not a good one. So I didn't even realize that. But anyway, I'd also like to say that an image that is pretty seared into my head is when I fly across the country, you fly across the Midwest, and you see these fields where they're cultivated in a circle, and the corners are left planted. I think it means they're unplanted, but it also recalls that line in the Torah. But breaking bread on broad is actually part of a food recycling. That's not the right word, but there's a lot of food that we receive from sources like the Archdiocese. That's all prepared, but we frequently have an excess of those boxes at the end of the day. Sometimes we've had as many as 40 extra boxes, and each box has 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches. We also receive food from an organization in the far northeast of Philadelphia called Caring for Friends. One of today's attendees, Terry Silver, has been driving up there almost every Tuesday for 3 or 4 months since he started to work with us, and picks up a combination of non-perishable food as well as fresh fruits and vegetables. We get food from an organization called Food Connect, which I believe is in partnership with Philabundance. But Food Connect goes around to restaurants and bakers and grocery stores and others and takes perishable food and provides it to food pantries and other outlets like Road of Shalom. So we're part of this food ecosystem that we're receiving these food from places that might not be able to pass or use it. It's excess to them, but then it becomes excess to us. So we're able to put the food back into the system in several ways. One is we identified several shelters in Philadelphia who are more than happy to take some of our food. So I call them up at the end of our operation and deliver food to them. Either I or one of the other volunteers puts the food in the back of our car, and we drive it and we drop it off to these food shelters. We call Food Connect, and they come back out and they'll take up extra perishable food. I think 3 weeks ago, one of their drivers picked up 70 gallons of milk that had a sell-by date that was coming up. So not wasting food is very much on our minds, and we have to really scramble to make sure that we don't waste the food. But so far, we've been able to find organizations and shelters that can take it and deliver it to others.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. So also lifting up that value of bal tashchit, of not wasting, in addition to some other, wonderful values of feeding the hungry and our obligation to the more vulnerable in our midst. Jane, can you share with us a little bit? I know you're newer to Judaism, but can you share with us a little bit about some of the values, some of the Jewish values that guide you in your work? And we'll unmute Malka. Malka, if you can just unmute.
Can people hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. I have to click 3 buttons. Anyways, yes. So I definitely relate to the preserving as much as you can and trying to make as little waste as you can, which is really an amazing thing working at a dairy farm because it's livestock. And so, innately, you're always going to produce a huge amount of waste, from the plastic for the feeding and to the, amount of cattle waste. And that list kind of just goes on and on. Especially with like the amount of plastic that we just need to use in order to like bottle and wrap our bales. But our community puts in a huge amount of effort to create as little waste as we possibly can. So we recycle, everything that we possibly can, and we really try to get more creative about ways we use our waste. Like we've definitely, we've used the plastics that we have used for baling bales in the past. We've used them in the gardens as kind of plastics for to prevent weeds from growing in our CSA fields. And just kind of little things like that. I think it's also a part of just biodynamic farming in general to really take into account the other elements of things that are happening in your fields, especially with dairy farming specifically. We do migrational herding. So we're migrating our cattle from, field to field in 17 pastures on our land. And so we really take into account what other types of plants are growing in those fields and what other animals are in those fields, and how can we work with the land rather than necessarily just trying to completely dominate it, and also give back to it. So we do lots of, maintenance just on the land. So that definitely really speaks to me as a strong, Jewish elemental value, even though the community itself isn't innately Jewish. And the biggest thing for me is that I recognize that it's wow, my life in Camp Hill really is just a consistent mitzvot, because the whole community structure is about giving back and really pushing past your own grievances for the sake of the better health of the community, and also helping the people that you are working with, and helping the cattle that I'm working with as well, because they're livestock, so they're bred in such a way that they really need humans to take care of them. They wouldn't survive on their own. So, if we neglect them, then, they just wouldn't survive. So for me, me, it's a consistent mitzvot of like, oh, I'm driving the milk an hour out to the store so that other people can like have this milk that we've produced. And like, I am milking this cow who really needs to be milked. Otherwise, like, they might get infections. And I am consistently working with and serving my villagers, which is what we refer to our people with developmental disabilities, so that they can have a better quality life.
Oh, Jane, I absolutely love what you just said, and I'm particularly struck by a couple of those values that you lifted up there. One, what we call in Hebrew, tsar ba'alei chayim, the ethical treatment of animals, and we're taught in the Torah, simple things about how you can't plow a field with a cow and a donkey mixed together because they're worried one would hurt the other, right? These are very basic things that it's harder for us who aren't living in that agricultural system to understand those laws, but you're right in it and you understand, like, these animals rely on us, right? We are in Genesis 1:26, at the very beginning, we're told that we have an obligation to some people mistranslate it, but it's this earth to v'chiv shuhas, the Hebrew, and people often translate it to subdue it. But really, subdue is not a good translation. It's really much more about to be responsible for it. And we have an obligation for these animals and for this earth. I love that. And then I also appreciate what you said just about the people. And I'm interested, and this kind of leads to my next question and something that Malka posted, a great question. And maybe we'll start with you, Jane, if you're okay with that, which is the overarching question I have for all of our participants is, how does your work uplift the dignity of your coworkers or those you serve? And dignity is such a huge Jewish value of not shaming people, of treating people with compassion and treating them as human beings, most importantly. And so I see a note that Malka asked is, how do the elderly folk help out in the farm, the dairy, the bakery? And I guess so that in particular, and then Jane, if you want to answer more as to how you think about sort of dignity in your work, and then I'd love to hear from Dan and Allie as well.
Clicking all buttons. Yeah. Yeah, no, this is a really big thing for me, because I think a lot of people coming from outside of our community, outside looking in, it can be very easy to kind of create a perception that, oh, the community is clearly just, abusing these people for free labor, or, they're not respectful to the fact that they, might have certain limits that other people don't have. But that isn't the case at all. And even I had that judgment, when I first came to the community. I was very skeptical about it. But now I've been there for 2 years, and really being more in it, I recognize that for me, a lot of like what dignity is respecting, the human's innate need to grow. And people want to grow. They want to feel like they're achieving something, and it's absolutely no different for our villagers. And so it's really just about how do we create a space where it's equal, and what is equalization? Because the fact is that, if you throw a baseball at me, I can catch that baseball. But if you throw a baseball at my villager who has Down syndrome and whose eyes are crossed, he won't be able to catch that baseball. So equalization is not necessarily about, we are doing the same thing for each other, in the same way, but it's about how do we create an environment where that person with Down syndrome can experience what it's like to catch a baseball, or to play a ball game in a safe way, where we don't necessarily have to be at their side holding their hand for them in order for them to experience it. It doesn't mean we're leaving them alone to throw balls at each other, but just you know what I mean? We're there to kind of oversee and to kind of help give a guiding hand, but we're not necessarily there to dictate strongly what they can or can't do. You know, we allow them to kind of decide for themselves while also still encouraging them to challenge themselves and to a healthy degree. So it's a great question. Like, what do we do? Like, how do we incorporate our villagers into the work that we do? So every location in our community is very different. I personally have not worked at all in the bakery, but I know that like they'll have the villagers do things like flip cookies and like so the cookies can cool down. But specifically on the dairy farm, you know, we have them, like we have our villagers, we have about 6 villagers who like work actively on our dairy farm with us. And they do things like, you know, scooping up piles that have been like pulled out from the barn area. So they'll like scoop piles and they'll take it to the manure pit. They'll help us clean the milk barn after milking because there's a ton of cow droppings and all sorts of things. So they'll help us clean up that and they'll help us like put down bedding. And, you know, it's amazing. Like some of the people we work with are actually very physically strong and in many ways very, very capable. And I think one of the great things about the way that our community is structured is that we have so many different things that we can do, it really allows there to be that opportunity for them to decide where they want to go and what they want to do. Do they want to work in the mosaics? Do they want to do pottery? Do they want to be on the CSA? Do they want to be on the dairy? And we're very grateful in that, you know, the villagers who work on the dairy really want to be there and they really enjoy it. And they really take like a lot of pride in knowing that they're like helping and contributing. And it's great for us too, because there's always a ton that needs to be done that is often very unexpected that comes up on the dairy. So having them like help with the little things helps us be able to maintain the perhaps bigger, you know, things that come up on the dairy day by day.
Thank you, Jane. I love that. I love, you know, the way you lifted up the dignity of each individual and also the way you spoke about sort of equality and equity and what, you know, what we see as equal is not always equal and what that really means and how we can truly treat each person as an individual and as a human being they are with that utmost dignity. Allie or Dan, can you speak a little bit to how you guys lift up the dignity of your coworkers or your clients, the people you serve?
Sure. To like similarly to what Jane has been talking about, I guess a couple of things. We work with a couple of different programs through Resources for Human Development, if anybody has heard of them. They have a few different branches that deal with like different areas. They work with adults who have like barriers to employment, whether it's like that they're non-neurotypical or have a physical disability or a language barrier or something like that. And we work with them with in a bunch of different ways. One pretty directly is they have some garden plots by the Schuylkill River, and some of their clients run garden plots and grow produce and things like that, which we're able to buy from them and sell in our store. So that's really great. And so that whole part of their program is using like trauma-informed, like urban gardening as therapy and things like that. And they have formed like a co-op of their clients. So these are people who actually own their own mini farming business. So that's really cool. They're called Cultivate, and they're a really awesome program. So we're really glad we're able to actually like support them financially by purchasing their produce. And the other way, how we got involved with them was through a friend who is, well, I don't know what she calls her position, but she helps people find jobs. And so one way that we help out is, again, like Jane was saying, like we have so many different things going on in the store that it's really a great way to find ways to help people. You know, for example, some of the folks from this program called Ideate, are looking for some job training. And so it's no problem for us to say, sure, you can come and do some of the work that you need to have on your evaluation so that you can get a job in a restaurant. Like you can do some prep, you can do some dishes, like whatever it is, and your supervisor can evaluate this and say, okay, this person did a great job, so we can host them in this way. Another part of Resources for Human Development's program is they have an art program where artists with barriers to employment can have art fairs and sell their art. So we carry their products as well. So it's really great to be able to help this program in such a great way. Like we're able to financially support through buying their produce. We're able to give artists shelf space to sell their wares. And we're also able to provide space where they can conduct their job training. We don't do the job training, but their supervisor can just use our space to bring them into an environment, get them used to it. And so they work, like Jane was talking about as well, like really giving people independence, building skills, making sure that people can live on their own and not so much dependent on other people. And another program we work with similarly is called Carousel Connections. And they work with, it's like young adults. So they tend to be, 18 to early 20s with autism, and similarly building skills and building job experience. And for a while we were hosting some of their clients once a week to come and bake in our kitchen. And we were teaching them how to make cookies and things like that. And on their end, they were running a small cafe out in Ardmore. So they were able to bake the cookies in our space and sell them in their cafe. And it's just really great to be able to work with people who are looking to have that kind of like training and independence and things like that. So what Jane was talking about made me think of these programs. So that's one way that I think that is helpful. And we also work with a bunch of mutual aid programs in Philly. So for example, like West Philadelphia Bunny Hop distributes, similarly to Breaking Bread on Broad, they distribute meals and produce and groceries and things. And we've been a pickup site for them. And we also have a program in our store where customers can purchase a meal that we make. Oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, people can purchase a meal that we'll cook and deliver to a community fridge, which are these great fridges where people can, it's like give what you can, take what you can for free. And we really love being able to support them. There's so many in our neighborhood. And I think on this topic, a really major tenet of mutual aid is the idea that this is solidarity, not charity, that you're standing with your community, you're giving to your community, like, in solidarity, you're not, some benefactor doling out, something that needs to be evaluated in some way.
Allie, I just want to say I absolutely love what you just said. And for those that are familiar, and you may remember learning this at Road of Shalom Hebrew School, years ago, the famous sage Maimonides talks about his ladder, this levels of tzedakah. And tzedakah, what we often translate as charity, first of all, is a really bad translation because it comes from the Hebrew word tzedek, which means justice. And it's about how do we create justice, right? It's not about charity. Charity implies a free will giving from the heart, right? It's a very different concept in Judaism. And Maimonides in his ladder, first of all, says that anonymous giving is much better than when we know the person. So I'm thinking about these ideas of these community fridges and the idea of dignity, right? That you put this thing in, someone can come anytime they want, they feel no shame. And Maimonides really lifted that up. But Maimonides says the highest form of tzedakah, of justice, of just giving, is actually not giving someone, but is a gift or a loan or job training to enable someone to lift themselves out of poverty together. And Jane, what I was hearing from you, what I'm hearing from you, Allie, with some of the job training, so much of this is really following those Jewish values. Really just absolutely beautiful. Dan, do you want to speak a little to those questions of dignity at Breaking Bread on Broad?
Sure. I'll try to um, explain what I think we're doing for the volunteers, but also for the families that we serve. Um, there are many, many little tasks that really need to be done from the volunteer side. And some of them are obvious, like helping our, well, it's just maybe concept of thinking about helping our families select their food or handing them out food. I think we started out, well, that's actually a client side thing. On a volunteer side, let me stick with that. Every task, whether it's breaking down boxes and putting them in the recycling bin and taking it down to the far end of the parking lot to put it in the collection point, um, picking up rotten food out of a bunch of grapes and putting it in the trash. These are tasks that, you know, inherently may seem insignificant, but they're very important to the experience of the families that come to select their food. So we're fortunate that our volunteers recognize that sort of intuitively. But we also, I know Ellen and I try to model that kind of behavior in our dealings with the volunteers, but just doing what we do. There's no task that's beneath my doing. I pick up trash, I hand out books, and I do everything in between. So anyway, I'm hoping that our volunteers feel the same way, that we're all part of an operation that has many components, and everything needs to be done to make it work right. So on the family side, I think I personally had a shift of thinking and perspective from handing out food to helping our families select food. And we actually rearranged the layout of the tables, how we operate, that helped us create that environment. We were fortunate to have a variety of Mandarin speaking people help us communicate with our families. We have about 60% of the families are Mandarin speaking, about 40% are Spanish speaking, and about 100% are non-English speaking. So it's been a challenge to communicate to people. And a couple of our I shouldn't say star volunteers, so they're so critical to what we do. A woman who had nothing to do with Road of Shalom. She's not a member. I don't think she lives in our neighborhood, but she read about our food operation on a listserv and said that although she's Asian, she needed to brush up on her language skills, and she would like to help out in some way. So we've had her help check in the families, and we could see from the get-go that the Mandarin-speaking families were just so much more relaxed. They felt more welcomed in that they could communicate with someone, and we could communicate with them. And prior to that, we were trying to use a combination of pantomime and I don't know what to try to explain things to people, but this was such a help. And some of our volunteers speak Spanish, and they're helpful. So these are things that we've done to raise up the dignity of the families. I just feel that we're doing the right thing because we've had a growth in the number of families who come to RS on Wednesday mornings.
Thank you, Dan. Last question that I have for you guys, and I'll actually, it's kind of two, but I think I'll combine it into one, and then I'd love to open it up to questions from other participants here, is about the sourcing and the supply chains. And how do you think sort of Jewishly and ethically about your sourced food and your supply chains? And where do Jewish values come into that? And how do you sort of think about ensuring that your supply chains are ethically sourced? Allie, you want to go first? Go for it.
Sure. So this is a question that is always like at the front of our minds when working on stocking the store and things like that. And trying to make sure that we are supporting other local businesses that we like, that do good work, making sure that we're sourcing produce as ethically as possible, but also while keeping it affordable for our neighborhood, which is our number one priority. So yeah, we're constantly kind of weighing out, like, you know, balancing our budget and the budget of our customers against, you know, the sourcing and things like that. And I think that we've been able to achieve a really good balance of having, you know, affordable staples, but then we can also bring in some local produce when it's seasonal and more affordable and things like that. And we are really lucky to know also a lot of like small business owners who do really great work. Like, for example, we have coffee from Cafe Roasters, which is a really awesome roasting. It's just one lady too who's really awesome, and it's the only, I think it's the only women-owned coffee roaster and the only Vietnamese coffee roaster in Philly. But she used to work for, I'm blanking on the name of the nonprofit, but it's like it's called K through 12 or something, and they help kids get into college. And so she donates to them from her proceeds. So doing things like supporting Two's business really supports, you know, so many other great things in Philly. Or we get granola from a place that donates to helping with, I'm sorry, I blanked on what they do. But anyway, they help contribute to other really great work as well. So supporting local businesses and sourcing our produce and meats and things like that as ethically as we can, while also keeping the price point at an accessible place for our community, is a bit of a challenge. But it's just something we're just constantly looking at and constantly thinking about. Yeah, so I mean, it's a question we'll never answer, but
no, I love that, Allie.
And I'm like, every purchase. So
yeah, I'm thinking about how, you know, especially in Judaism, we're often faced with competing mitzvot, competing commandments, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, so, you know, you have a choice, like you want to get a local chicken or you want an organic chicken, right? You can't have both. Which is the value that's higher to you? And understanding that with the local chicken, you're supporting the local economy and you're cutting down on greenhouse gas emissions from being pumped. But with the organic chicken, you're cutting down on antibiotic use or, you know, GMOs or other, you know, farming practices. And so I think it's very interesting how we, and it's based on our own personal values, how we weigh that. And I'm also hearing cost and price and all of these different values come in, and you have to weigh them and find that balance, right? It's very difficult. Dan or Jane, do you want to speak a little bit to the idea of ethical sourcing? Yeah, and sourcing with Jewish values. Jane, go for it.
Okay, so it's definitely another thing that I just feel very grateful for about my community, is that, you know, it, like, the whole community is kind of like ethically based around, you know, how do we produce the least amount of waste that we possibly can, and also where are we getting things from and where are we distributing to, and like what are the values of the people that we're partnering with, and what are, you know, as like with the dairy farm specifically, I mean, we try to be as self-sufficient as we can. So like we create, like 95% of our feed is coming from our own fields. But then there is that like 5%, and oftentimes it ends up being a higher percentage where we will like need to go out and buy feed from other farms. you know, because things happen, like bales sometimes get moldy and then you can't feed them to your cattle. So we're definitely like consistently like connecting to people in the area who are also running their own like small farms, who are, you know, kind of like, they're the people who help us the most in terms of like getting the supplies that we need. Like there's a man who comes by with a giant truck and all he does is like travel around the countrysides of PA with this truck full of like basic farm worker stuff, like boots and gloves and jackets. And so when he comes by, like all the dairy crew, the whole dairy crew and the villagers like will come, and like our dairy bosses will buy things for us from them. We also work a lot with like Amish communities. Like we'll have a lot of the Amish communities like come out and help us build structures. If we need to get animals slaughtered, we'll like take a lot of our animals to Amish communities to get slaughtered. So it's really just like for us specifically, I think we put a lot of focus into creating more of those intimate relationships with the people that we're, you know, getting things from, but then also like giving to or selling through. Like all of the people that we like, or all of the store locations that we're selling our milk through, they are all people with like very similar, you know, ideologies about like, how do I put it? Like very similar ideologies about, or goals about like, you know, food production and like how to, you know, make less waste and, yeah, and it creates a really good sense of community with not only our community, but like the community outside of our community. And how do we create those interlaced relationships in a way that, you know, we can be relied on, but that we can also rely on them. So it's really just like a beautiful give and take in that way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. Dan, do you want to speak to that last question about sort of ethically sourcing and supply chains with Jewish values?
Sure, briefly. I don't really know anything about the sourcing of a good portion of our food, almost all of the food. But it is something we could possibly look at, but then I don't know what we'd find. So we just focus on getting good quality food and food that we try our best, and we've made repeated efforts at getting food that is culturally aligned with our demographics, which is, you know, food for Asian families and food for Latinx families. And we've been able to skew the food we get on occasion in those directions, and we try to do that. But we've also, actually, there is something. We got a very generous donation from a man named Jeff Brown, who owns and operates ShopRite supermarkets and in the city and the suburbs. And if you don't know anything about Jeff, I would search him on the internet. It's an incredibly wonderful story that he has to tell. And as a matter of fact, I'm working on scheduling a Zoom session with him and his son, which we are going to put on the RS website, not live, but recorded, because he's done such a wonderful job of acting ethically himself. Just to whet your appetite, he has deliberately set up supermarkets in food deserts. These are areas where there are not healthy food available to residents within a half a mile, let's say, walk. And he has worked with the community through town hall meetings to identify the kinds of food that they want, especially in Muslim communities where halal is important to them. He finds certified halal foods and the types of foods that people would like to shop for. And he's also done a tremendous amount of work of hiring returning citizens, people who've been in jail, who had a very hard time finding work. He's hired, not only hired them, but he's developed a training manual for them, which has been used by other supermarket chains to encourage people to hire returning citizens and leverage the skills that they do have. And he's done more. So anyway, very interesting man. And I hope you'll be able to watch the Zoom session when we put it together. I'm hoping within a few weeks. And yeah, that's about it.
That's great. Thank you, Dan. So we have a few minutes left. We have a little more than 10 minutes, and I would love to hear from some of you. What questions do you have for any or all of our panelists? Feel free to, if you want to use the hand raise button or just unmute and jump in. There aren't too many of us, so we can maybe have a little discussion. I'm interested of other questions you might have, either for any individual panelist or for all three of them.